Hey, do you want to know how to avoid burnout and love your job? And if you don't love your job and you're trying to avoid burnout over the long term, it can be really difficult. Here are my favorite ways to learn to love your job so you can avoid burning out. First, this is really important, is find a purpose greater than yourself in what you do. You may be stuck in a job that is mundane. You may be stuck in a job that you hate. But if you have a purpose, if there is something burning within you that you are fulfilling, this becomes just one step in the road that allows you to fulfill the greater purpose of what you want to do, and it no longer is a burden, but that step that you get to take to elevate. This is a tricky thing, but the belief in something bigger than yourself is extremely important. There's a book called Peak Performance, and they evaluated attributes that people need to have in order to be successful over decades. And when they looked at it, one of the most significant things was this idea of a purpose greater than yourself, a belief in something bigger than you. And they looked at a man who was a decathlete, the greatest decathlete in the world today. At the time, he was still competing, when he was competing, and he had been to 3 Olympics. And at his 3rd Olympics as a decathlete, he was in the final race of the 10 races, and it was the 1500 meter. And he held the world record in the decathlon at the time. He's at the Olympics, and he wanted to break the world record. He was already guaranteed to win the gold. He could run the slowest 1500 meter run he had ever run in his life, and still he would win the gold medal. So he had no drive to win the gold medal. He only had a drive to beat his own time and his own self. And he had to run the 1500 meter race, I think, a little more than 2 seconds faster than he had ever run it in his life. So it would be a personal best for him. This is a substantial amount of time to take off for a guy at this level of athleticism. However, this man, he was an atheist. He believed in inspiring the children that would be watching him at home. Because as a little boy, when he had watched athletes compete, that is what had lit his soul up and made him become the decathlete that he was. And so as he ran that race, and as the lactic acid began to build in his system, and he was wanting to slow down and give in to the fatigue and the crushing pressure that he was facing, he persisted because he had a vision of those children watching him as he had before. And he wanted to do it for them. And he did it. He broke the world record. That's a powerful story of belief, and it is so true for performance. So if you have a crap job, but it is essential to building your greatest purpose for something that you want, you can use that to keep you from being burned out. The second thing to do is to develop relationships with those you work with and with your customers. If your job's a crap job, and that's where you're at, you can still find real joy with those you work with. You can find joy in the customers you engage with. Make that the focus of what you do, and find joy in helping others and helping the employees that you work with do better and achieve more. You can create team and power and growth anywhere you are, no matter what you're doing, if that is the mindset that you have. Rather than retreating and saying, I hate my job, I hate these people, find a way to connect. If you can't do either of these things in your job because it's so bad, get another job. But if that's something you can do within your space, you got it. And I've seen this happen over and over again. I was living in California. I'm from Canada, and I had not really encountered a lot of Hispanic people. But when I moved to California, I was so impressed by the energy that all of these people were putting into the people that had come from, south of the border, Mexico, Honduras, wherever. There's a whole bunch of people that come across and come to California to work. I was absolutely amazed at the work ethic and the joy in which the Hispanic people that I saw worked with. They're singing, they're laughing, they're joyful, and they're doing hard jobs that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be stuck in that. And yet they were full of energy and happy. And I would talk to them. I was working at Quicksilver in the warehouse I had a whole bunch of Hispanic employees that were folding clothes, embroidering clothes, packing, shipping, doing all this stuff, it's hard work and in some ways mindless and mundane. But they were singing and laughing and, having fun lunches, and I enjoyed their energy. I would go and have lunch with them because it was so fun to eat with them and have, share in that kind of jovial experience. And I would talk to them about their lives. And consistently, the story I heard was, yeah, we moved to America because we wanted to give our kids a better chance. And so I'm doing this job, I have an education, but I can't seem to get that kind of work here. So I'm doing this job and just gonna keep working and have another job. Often they had 2 jobs or more. They're working to get their kids into college to give them that better life. And their whole existence that they're bearing out is to lift their children to a new state. And they remember where they come from. They remember the way they lived. And they hold on to that gratitude and the hope of a better generation for their children. That kept them from being burned out. Guaranteed. There was one story I actually witnessed on television when I was down there of a couple that worked like 2 jobs, full-time, minimum wage, and then in the evenings would go out and gather recyclables and use the recycling to supplement their income so that they could send their kids to college. I have never seen a couple work so hard, and these 2 were so happy, and their children loved them. That is how you avoid burnout. Have a purpose, love the people you're with, and have fun. I learned that from my employees that I work with in California, and I appreciate that. So if you're struggling with this thing, if you're struggling with burnout, change your mindset, develop something that you're powerfully believing in, and give yourself that purpose so that you can drive and make good relationships with the people you work with. It'll make everything better and keep you going so that you're not waking up dreading your life every day that you go to work. So I'll give you one more example of burnout because I worked a lot of really rough jobs in my life. And I did two different jobs that were just miserable, absolutely miserable, really grueling physical labor. The one, I worked for this company in Vancouver, Canada, and we would unload rail carts with fish meal, and these were 80-pound bags of fish meal, maybe 100, some of them, I can't, they're varied in size, 80 to 100-pound bags of fish meal. And we had to take these bags that had been just thrown into the freight train, not stacked or anything, just all messed and piled, and we would throw one over our shoulder, go into a semi-truck container, and load pallets to the ceiling of the semi-container, wrap them in shrink wrap, and then they would get driven over to the ocean side of Vancouver and sent out to sea. It was miserable. I am the size I am, and the guys I was working with at the time were big. A lot of them were, some of them were actually ex-Canadian Football League players. Sadly, working this job. And we got paid by the container we filled. So for every semi-container I could fill with nicely stacked 80-pound bags of meal, I got $80. So think about that, right? That's a lot of work. And I would hustle so hard. And I remember the first 2 weeks of that work, I was in really good shape. I was so beat up and so sore at the end of each day, I couldn't even sleep in my bed. I had to lay on the hard floor with my knees up on the couch because my back was in such pain from the energy of lifting these bags. I worked 10 hours a day because I needed money, and this is the job I had. But I didn't make a single friend at that place, and I was just making money to get by. I didn't have a reason for making money. I just was trying to survive. And in that job, oh my gosh, I remember waking up and just thinking, please let me die. I don't want to go to work today. It was horrible, horrible job. There were guys that had worked there quite a time and continue to work there, and they seemed happy. I was friends with none of them. I didn't do anything, and I quit that job probably after 2 months. Didn't last long. The difference with that was I also went tree planting. I started tree planting actually right out of high school, my first year, and I ended up doing that most of the way through college. I paid for most of my college with tree planting. And I would get paid by the tree. I'd be up in the mountains, have packs of like 40 to 50 pounds full of trees and a shovel, and I'd run up a mountain and I'd dig a hole, put a tree in, and keep going, and had to be spaced a certain way, and I got paid, anywhere from 10 to, I think the most I ever got paid was 25 cents a tree. And my goal was to make $150 to $200 a day. That was my goal. The reason I had that as my goal was because, one, if I could do it, I could be finished by August, and then I could take August off to water ski the rest of the summer before I went back to school. I really liked that. The other reason, it was the only way I knew that I could pay for college. I couldn't make $10,000 in a summer doing anything else that I knew at the time that I was working. And so I needed 10 grand to get back into school and be able to keep going. And I also made some really good friends tree planting. There was this camaraderie that we had, and we would curse the sky when it rained on us too hard, or the elements, right? We just kind of had these games, and we would play these games. We'd go out on the river and we'd jump around on logs and we'd fall in the water, and we just did all these things that we did to make it kind of a joyful experience. Now, I did not like that job. I didn't. I truly didn't. In fact, my brother and I took a picture together on a burn on a mountain. We're standing there with our packs. We're covered in dirt. We got our gear, and he keeps it in his law office. He's a partner at a law firm, and it says, "Never again," right? But I think so fondly of that time. And it wasn't something that dragged me down. I was full of energy, regardless of doing it, because my purpose of doing it was allowing me to get into university, a place I wanted to go, as well as giving me 1 full month to play and mess around in the lake before I went back to college. It was a really good bargain for me, as well as the friends I made. I made good friends doing that, and that kept me from being burned out. I tree planted for 5 years of my life. Not years, 5 summers. 5 summers. It's a summer job. And I was good at it because I had a belief bigger than myself, and I made friends with the people I worked with. You can do this too. So, stick around if you like this, and watch this next video that I'm sending, How to Be a Leader, the 5 Great Leadership Traits. This is something that might help you if you're struggling with burnout. I'm James Burnham. Thanks for joining me.